let's just do a summary. The quick summary is as follows. We started last week the book of Tanya. And the book of the Tanya is really a book which describes, the book of Tanya describes to us the nature of the soul, the nature of the Jewish soul, and its task in the world, and how it refines the world, and our duty in the world. Now, when it began, we said that when the soul comes down into the world, there is an angel that administers an oath to the soul. And it says to the soul, you should be a Tzaddik. And if you don't be a Tzaddik, at least don't be a Rasha. So he wanted to understand, what does this mean exactly, that the soul is commanded to be a Tzaddik and not a Rasha? What exactly is a Tzaddik? And what exactly is a Rasha? What is a righteous person? And what is a evil person, a bad person? And then the Tanya began this discussion of describing to us that there are different concepts of Tzaddikim and different concepts, as we're going to see, of Reshaim as well. There's the Tzaddik v'tov lo, there's a Tzaddik v'ra lo, there's a Rasha v'tov lo, a Rasha v'ra lo, and then there's a Beinoni. There's a Tzaddik who has it good, there's a Tzaddik who has it bad, there's a wicked person that has it good, a wicked person that has it bad, and then there is a Beinoni who's called the Middleman. And the difficulty was in trying to understand exactly what is the status of the Tzaddik and the Rasha. Is the Tzaddik just somebody who is better, who does more good than bad? And is the Rasha somebody who does more bad than good? And is the Beinoni, the middle person, somebody whose good deeds are the same in weighing out as somebody's bad deeds? And we got to this point where we didn't yet get to a conclusion. And if you look on the screen, you'll see we got to the point where it says Uba Gemara, Sof Perek Tet de Brachot. So here in the Gemara of Brachos, at the end of chapter 9, it says over there, Tzaddikim Yetze Tov Shoftam, that the Tzaddikim, their good inclination rules over them. Reshaim Yetze Hara Shoftam. With regards to the wicked people, their evil inclination rules over them. Or as is translated over here, he is judged or motivated and ruled by his good nature, with the good nature having the final say, whereas the wicked are motivated and ruled by their evil nature, with their evil nature having the final say. This means to say that the Tzaddik is a person, imagine, is every person has, like we see, there are two people that are on the shoulders of each person. The one person who's on the one shoulder has a halo around him, and the other person on the other shoulder has this fork, this red fork, and this red tail, and these horns, and so on and so forth. And what's going on here is this is the concept of the good inclination and the evil inclination. And every time a person is confronted with a decision to make in the world on what path to follow, he is going to have two opinions. One opinion will be opinion that will say do good, and another opinion will be an opinion that says do bad. For example, I like to give this as an example because it's quite practical. It's easy to understand. If a person is faced in front of him with a poor person, and the poor person says, can you please help me? I need some tzedakah. I need some charity. So the first reaction is a person says to himself, all right, I'll give you. How much do you want? The fellow says, I need $100. And he then starts to consider within himself, should he give the $100? Should he give $50? Should he give $10? Perhaps the fellow asked for too much. And so therefore, at this point in time, he starts to think to himself, maybe you shouldn't give the fellow anything at all. What's going on here is that he has these two natures within him. And at the time that he has to make a moral decision or any decision that he's got to do, he's going to find himself with a situation that he's going to have two voices. One voice is going to tell him, do the right thing. And the other voice is going to tell him, don't do the right thing. Do the wrong thing, because as far as I'm concerned, that's the right thing. The point of the matter is that the righteous individual is judged by his good nature, which means to say that the good will always overwhelm the bad. Whereas the wicked person will find that in most situations that he comes across in life, his bad negative will come out more so than the good. When a person is faced, for example, in the situation of an argument with somebody, he might come along and say, on the one hand, he could say, I'm going to give in. I'm going to humble myself and I'm going to give in to the other person. And I'm going to say, let him rather win this particular argument and let there be peace. On the other hand, he can say, when the argument begins to erupt, he can say, no, I'm the one that is totally right and I'm going to prove my point. At this point in time, we see that the two natures begin to interact. And the one nature says, do this action, and the other nature says, do the other action. The righteous person is judged more by the good nature, which means in his general behavior, there will always be this concept that he wants to do good. Whereas the wicked person finds himself judged more, he's motivated more by the evil side of him, which will encourage him to do things that are not in keeping with Torah, not in keeping with moral values, not in keeping with a godly value. And finally, he says, Beinonim ze b'ze shoftam. With regards to the middleman, he is judged by both the good and evil nature. So whereas the righteous man finds himself completely overwhelmed by his good, and the wicked man finds himself overwhelmed by his evil, the Beinoni, the middleman, it's not a person necessarily whose good deeds and whose bad deeds are weighed in at the same level, but rather he will find himself constantly with this conflict where there is a judgment of both good and evil. There will be a fight, and he's going to have to go through the experience of trying to find out which is the better path. It's not so easy for him to do good, or it's not so easy for him to do evil. On the other hand, every situation that comes up for him, he finds himself not knowing which direction to take. Omar Rabbah, said Rabbah, the great sage in the Talmud, Kagon Ana Beinoni. Rabbah said, for example, myself, I am a Beinoni. Now, Rabbah was a great sage. How could he say of himself that I'm simply a Beinoni? He didn't call himself a Tzaddik. He didn't call himself a Rasha, but he called himself a Beinoni. He called himself a middleman. Omar le Abaye said to him, Abaye was the pupil of Rabbah. And everybody knows how great Abaye was, because Abaye and Rabbah were the two great rabbis who were involved in Talmudic debates in the Talmud. And he was just a student of Rabbah, and he was a great sage. So he turns to his master, and he says to him, Lo shavik mar chayelechol bria. He says, you don't let anybody live. You make it impossible for any creature to live, which means to say, Rabbah, my teacher, my master, if you come along and you say to us that you're considered to be a Beinoni, and everybody knows that you're a great, outstanding Tzaddik, then what chance do we have of ever becoming anything? We will always remain as Reshaim, as evil people. Abaye argued thus, if you are a Beinoni, then all those on a lower level than you fall into the category of wicked, concerning whom our sages say the wicked, even while alive, are considered dead. By calling yourself a Beinoni, you thus make it impossible for anyone to live. And this is very strange. Rabbah is a great sage. He's not a liar. On the other hand, it's important that he doesn't have false humility. So if he says to us, and he says to the world, just like me, I'm a Beinoni, I'm a middleman, how could he make such a statement? Obviously, the Talmud wants to tell us a secret about what is really considered, who is really considered to be a righteous person, who is considered to be a wicked person, and who is considered to be a Beinoni. Everybody knows that Rabbah was a Tzaddik. So why did he call himself a Beinoni? In order to understand this well, in addition to the question which will soon follow, that according to the common conception of a Beinoni as a person having half mitzvot and half transgressions, how could a great sage like Rabbah mistake himself for a Beinoni? A further question is implied. If a Beinoni is simply one having half mitzvot and half transgressions, then his status is readily identifiable, and there is no possible room for debate, which means to say that according to Rabbah at this point in the discussion, Rabbah considers himself to be a person whose good deeds and bad deeds are on the same level. But this makes no sense, because Rabbah was clearly a Tzaddik whose good deeds for sure outweighed his bad deeds. Why then did he call himself a Beinoni? V'gam lahavin ma she'amar Iyov Baba Basra Perek Aleph, also what the man Job said. Job, as we know in the story of the Tanakh, was a man who was beset by troubles from God. Job. He was a man who was, Job was a man who was beset with all sorts of troubles from God. The reality is that he was a very righteous man. And then the Satan came along, and he made a story up, and when God says to Satan says to him, I see this man Job. He is a righteous man. There is none like him in all the world. And the Satan comes along to God and says, yeah, but that's because you give it to him good. If you would take away all the things that he has, you would see he would rebel. And so poor Job comes along and unfortunately has to lose out on a good life just because the Satan came along to falsely accuse Job of a behavior that, of course, he never had. And as a result, he goes through all the suffering. During the suffering, he says to God, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Barata Tzaddikim, you have created righteous people. Barata Reshaim, you have created evil people. Now, anybody reading these words should be surprised. They should say to themselves, it's very strange. He comes along and he tells us, Job is coming along and he's telling us that God created righteous people and he created wicked people. Now, we know for ourselves that nobody is created as a righteous person and nobody is created as an evil person. We are all given free choice to decide on what path to take in life. If we wish to be righteous, we can be as righteous as Moshe Rabbeinu. If we wish to be wicked, God forbid, we can be as wicked as we want to. How could Job come along and tell us? He says to God, how can he shout at God? And he says to him, it's your fault. How can we stand before you? How can you accuse us, God, of the bad that we do? Because you, God, have created righteous people and you have created wicked people. So therefore, the argument is valid. Why are you punishing me, God? If I am indeed evil, it is because of you. I did not create myself the way I am. Do you really think, God, that when I came into the world, I said to myself, I'm going to be an evil person? No person in their right mind would come into the world and think such a thing. People want to be good people. Everybody wants to be a good person. So therefore, God, it's your fault. I would be a wicked person because you created me wicked. And if I should be righteous, well, that is because you've created me righteous too. Vaha. And so he says over there, Tzaddik v'Rasha lo k'amar. It doesn't say over there, for he does not decree, God doesn't decree that a person should be righteous or wicked. The Gemara relates that God decrees that a child about to be born will be wise or foolish, strong or weak, and so on. However, whether the child will be righteous or wicked, God does not say. This is not predetermined. Rather, it is left to the individual's free choice. How then are we to understand Job's complaints? You have created righteous men, you have created wicked men. V'gam lahavin mahus madregas haBeinoni. And also to understand this level of the rank of the middleman, the person who is not righteous and is not entirely wicked. Where does this person fit in? The mahut of a tzaddik is righteous, which means that the essence of the tzaddik is righteousness. The mahut of the wicked man is evil. The essence of the wicked man is evil. What is the mahut, the essential nature of the Beinoni? Certainly, he is not half meritorious and half filled with sins. Because if that was the case, how could Rabbah himself call himself a Beinoni? How could he make a mistake and say that he's a Beinoni? If indeed it is that a Beinoni is somebody who is half righteous and half filled with sins, Rabbah himself was a Tzaddik in that respect. He was filled with good. How could he make a mistake and assume himself to be only somebody who's half righteous and half filled with sins? The noita, it's known. The law pasik pume mikirsa, that he never stopped studying Torah. Ad she'afilu malach hamaves lo haya yachol lishtot bo. I think I'm getting a bit of feedback from one of the microphones. I'm not sure where it's coming through. One of the speakers, somebody's speaker is on a little bit too loud, and the feedback is coming back. I think somebody needs to turn their speaker down a little bit because there's a bit of feedback coming through. Until such a degree that even the angel of death was not able to have any rule over him. So we have a principle: if a person is involved in the study of Torah and he doesn't stop himself from studying, then even the angel of death will not be able to have a hold over him. He will not be able to take his life. And Rabbah was such a sage that it turned out that he never stopped studying Torah for a second. Even the angel of death had no control over Rabbah. Therefore, how could Rabbah assume that he was considered to be a Beinoni? Such was Rabbah's diligence that he did not neglect his studies for even one moment. Qualitatively, too, his learning was on so high a plane that the angel of death was unable to overpower him. How could Rabbah then assume in this discussion that we're having that he would make a mistake and say that he was filled half-half? He had half meritorious and half sins. And more than this, we have a bigger question. When a person does sins, he is called a totally wicked person. Now, this applies all the time. The moment that a person is involved in a sin, he cannot be called a Beinoni. He certainly cannot be called a Tzaddik. He is called a Rasha at the time that he sins. For at the time one sins, until he repents, he is deemed completely wicked. And if afterwards the person will do repentance, Tzaddik Gamur, he's called a complete Tzaddik. This is a rule that we have. And if he was sinful and then repented, thus ceasing to be wicked, he's deemed completely righteous. For example, if a person goes through his entire life and he commits all sorts of sins, and 10 minutes before he dies, he begins to clap on his heart. He says, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu. He says to God, I've done all these actions, and I now do Teshuva on it. Then at that point in time, he becomes called a Tzaddik Gamur. He's completely righteous. He did the Teshuva necessary, and he is not liable for anything that he did. It's as if nothing took place. If he is really sincere, and he did the Teshuva as he should, he's called a Tzaddik Gamur, even though he committed all those sins. Implication: the moment that a person commits a sin, he is called wicked. And the term wicked applies to him until he repents. When he repents and he does good, he is now called a Tzaddik. So therefore, where's the Beinoni altogether? Even a person who commits a very light sin, even if it was a rabbinical sin, he is called wicked. As it's brought down over there in that source. And even if a person was in a situation whereby the mitzvah of rebuking somebody against sinning, and he didn't take the opportunity to rebuke the person, such an individual is called wicked. This is an amazing thing. If a person sees another person who is sinning, doing the wrong thing, and he has the opportunity to forewarn that person and to tell him, listen, you need to do Teshuva, you can't do those sins. And the person chose not to tell this person. And even though it has nothing to do with him, but he didn't rebuke, which is a positive mitzvah. He didn't rebuke, of course, in the way that he should rebuke, but he didn't rebuke the person. He is called wicked. So the culture came. So we see all these examples over here, whereby there are certain categories of when you keep to certain things, you're called a tzaddik. When you do things wrong, you're called a rasha. On the other hand, according to this, there's no such thing as being a Beinoni. And Rabbah calls himself a Beinoni. But Rabbah is a tzaddik because all of his life is good. He is so good, Rabbah, a great teacher in the Talmud. He is so good that he never even stopped studying Torah for 1 second. V'kol shekain v'kal v'chomer b'mevatel ezo mitzvahs aseh she'efshar lo l'kaima. All the more so, if a person was negligent and he did not do one of the positive mitzvahs that it's possible to fulfill, for example, a person who had the opportunity to study Torah and he didn't do so, a very great Aveira, Bitul Torah, he had the opportunity to study Torah. He was sitting doing nothing altogether. And he didn't know what to do with his day. And he just sat there looking into space instead of opening up a book of Torah and to study. She'alav darshu Rabboseinu Zal, that our rabbis expound, Ki dvar Hashem bizah, that he has despised the word of Hashem. He kares tikares. He should be cut off. That soul shall be cut off. If a person had the opportunity to study Torah, and instead he didn't study Torah, he just wasted the whole day, says the Torah a strong statement against him. That soul shall be cut off. Upshita, the mikre rasha tfei me'over isur drabonan. And of course, we can see that this person is called a rasha, a bad person, even more so than a person who transgressed against a rabbinical prohibition. And if so, al korchecha, it's against your will. You should be able to know this. Beinonim ein po afilu avon bitul Torah. Comes out that the category of the Beinonim, he does not even have the sin of being negligent in studying Torah. So this means to say that while we talk about the Tzaddik as being this outstanding good person, and the Rasha as being this terribly bad person, when it comes to the Beinonim, according to what the Tanya is describing to us, the Beinonim is such a person that he will not stop studying Torah even for a second, which means if a person wants to be on the level of Beinonim, not the level of Tzaddik, if a person wants to be a middle level person, he can only be a middle level person if he doesn't even have the sin of neglecting to study Torah. A sin most difficult to avoid and counted among those sins that people transgress daily. So this is a difficult thing. If I want to consider myself to be a Beinonim, I've got to be a person that does not stop studying Torah all day long if I've got free time to study, of course. And because of this, Rabbah made a mistake with himself. That's why he said he's a Beinonim, because he didn't stop studying Torah. So as far as he was concerned, he for sure was a Beinonim, because he didn't stop studying Torah. But nevertheless, to think of himself as being a Tzaddik, he wasn't quite sure if he could put himself onto that level. Since a Beinonim is innocent, even of neglecting Torah study, Rabbah could mistakenly consider himself a Beinonim, even though he scrupulously observed even the most minor commandments and never ceased from his studies. Hagar says the note, Uma shekosuf bezohar chelek gimel daf reish lamed aleph, that's written in the Zohar. Kol she'me'utin avonoisav, he whose sins are few is classified as a righteous man who suffers, implying that even according to the Zohar, the meaning of a righteous man who suffers is one who does have sins, albeit few. And if so, a Beinonim must be one who is in part virtuous and in part sinful. He she'elas Rav Hamnuna le'Eliyahu. This was the question that Rav Hamnuna asked of Eliyahu HaNavi. As we know, when a person elevates himself to a very high level of spirituality, he can even merit that Eliyahu HaNavi reveal himself to him and teach him the secrets of Torah. And Rav Hamnuna, who was a great sage, was on a very great level, merited that Eliyahu HaNavi revealed himself to Rav Hamnuna. And while he was experiencing this revelation of Eliyahu HaNavi, Rav Hamnuna asked Eliyahu the question regarding this concept of, isn't it true that we can say that an evil person is one who has more sins than he has merits? Isn't a righteous person somebody whose sins are less? Isn't that what it is? He asked Eliyahu. And that's a valid question. That's where we began the discussion. But according to what Eliyahu answered over there, Hapirush, the answer is Tzaddik v'ralo. When we talk about a tzaddik who has it bad, who kamoshe katuv b'raya mehemna pashas mishpatim dileel. This is exactly what it says in the Raya Mehemna, that the righteous man who suffers is one whose evil nature is subservient to his good nature. And so the answer is V'shivim panim l'Torah. There is a principle that there are indeed 70 faces for the Torah. What does that mean practically? So the Rebbe notes that the words, means the Chabad Rebbe, the seventh Rebbe of Chabad, he says there, and the Torah has 70 facets. The Torah has 70 different ways of understanding it. Help us understand Rav Hamnuna's query. It is difficult to understand how Rav Hamnuna would even entertain the notion that a righteous man who suffers is one who actually sins, inasmuch as all the above-mentioned questions clearly lead us to assume the opposite. Rav Hamnuna's query, however, was prompted only by the fact that the Torah has 70 facets, and he thought that this was possibly one of these facets, which means to say that Rav Hamnuna was bringing down one of the 70 interpretations of what this is. But nevertheless, we're not holding by that. That is just one opinion that says that a righteous person is somebody whose sins are less than his aveiros. But when we speak about it on the level which we are supposed to understand, is that the righteous person basically never sins, because even the Beinonim can never sin. Even the Beinonim is involved in Torah study all day long. Even he doesn't sin. All the more so a righteous person will not sin. So anybody who wants to start working on himself, and he wants to start thinking of himself, am I a Tzaddik, am I a Beinoni, or am I a Rasha? If the person thinks that he's a Tzaddik, because people say to him, you're a good guy, you do good in the world, you're a moral person. So he starts to think to himself, you know what? I think you're quite right. I am a good guy. I am a Tzaddik. So the first chapter of Tanya comes to teach us that might not be so. Because the Tzaddik is somebody who never sins. In fact, even a Beinoni is somebody who never sins. Which means to say that if we're not on the level yet, whereby we do not commit any sins, which means that we're involved in Torah study and mitzvot observance all day long, then in fact we don't even meet the requirements of being a Beinoni. The Alter Rebbe comes and shocks us all into realizing that perhaps we are all Reshaim. God forbid, but he doesn't mean it in the sense of what we think is a Rasha. He means it in a much deeper sense. He doesn't want to come and tell us that we're all nonsense, that we're all worth nothing. He wants to tell us a definition of something so that we'll be able to work on ourselves to understand where we really fit in the scheme of the souls within bodies in this world. V'hada amrinan ba'olma, and that we say in the general sense. The mechitza al mechitza mikre beinoni, that a person who has half good deeds, half bad deeds, he's the beinoni. V'rov zechiyot mikre tzaddik, and the person who has the majority of his actions, he does good, he's called a tzaddik. Reshaim hamushal, says the Alter Rebbe, this is only a borrowed name. It's a figurative use of the term borrowed from its true usage in order to emphasize a particular point. Thus, the names Beinoni and Tzaddik, denoting a balance between the merits and sins, are in fact but borrowed names, which means to say, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and everybody's getting excited, the principle is we're being judged. And God has these books in front of him. He's got 3 books, one for the Tzaddikim, one for the Beinonim, and one for the Reshaim. Who gets into the book of the Tzaddikim? Who gets into the book of the Beinonim? Who gets into the book of the Reshaim? Those people whose good deeds outweigh their bad deeds are placed in the book of life for the Tzaddikim. Those people whose bad deeds outweigh their good deeds are put into the book of the opposite because they're on the side of the Reshaim. And those people who find that their good deeds and bad deeds are basically on the same level on the scale, they are put in the book of the Beinonim. They're sitting there waiting for 10 days. Are they going to do Teshuva and cause the scale to go down on the side of the Tzaddikim so that it will outweigh and therefore they will be placed into the book of life? Or will they, God forbid, mess up during the 10 days and they will be placed ultimately in the book of the opposite because they are Reshaim? The Alter Rebbe says the concept of Tzaddik and Rasha, as we apply it in this context, is only a borrowed term. It is not really the meaning of what Tzaddik is, and it is not the meaning of Rasha, and it is not the meaning of Beinoni. On the contrary, as we're going to learn later on, when we say the word Tzaddik, we're referring to a person that never commits a sin. He will certainly not commit a sin in action. He will not commit a sin in speech, and he will not commit a sin in thought either. Now, the Beinoni is going to fit into the same category, because in order to be the Beinoni, you have to be involved in Torah study all day long. Otherwise, you can't be a Beinoni, as we learned before. And that is why Rabbah considered himself to be a Beinoni, because he was involved in Torah. But he couldn't put himself onto the level of Tzaddik, so he made a mistake and he called himself a Beinoni. And the Rasha is the person who's stuck with this mentality in life whereby he's got the bad and he's got the good, but the bad has the overwhelming effect on him to cause him to stumble in some way through his thoughts, through his speech, through his deeds. And this all relates le'inyan schar v'onish, in the matter of reward and punishment, which means when it comes to reward and punishment, a person whose good deeds outweigh his bad is considered to be a tzaddik, and he will receive reward. And the person whose bad deeds outweigh the good, he's considered to be a rasha, and therefore he receives what's called onesh, punishment. But he is not necessarily what's called rasha, and this one is not necessarily what's called tzaddik. Because one is judged after the majority of his deeds. Umikre tzaddik bedino, and he's called a tzaddik in his final judgment, because he was successful in his trial. He was acquitted at his trial. When everybody above, the based in Shel was looking at this particular soul, and they see that he's involved in good things, and every now and again he did something negative, they say, but nevertheless, overall, this person is a righteous individual. He's a tzaddik. This is only a borrowed term, and this is not the concept of what tzaddik is. It is only in the legal sense that the term tzaddik is applied to one who performs more good deeds than evil. Aval le'inyan amitas shem hatoar v'hamayle shel malas u'madregas chalukas tzadikim u'beinonim. But when it comes to this whole matter of the truth, of the description, and the real level of the different divisions of the tzadikim and the beinonim, etc., Amru Rabbeinu Zal, our rabbis teach us, tzadikim yetze tov shoftam. When it comes to the tzadikim, you can tell what's a tzadik. The yetze tov rules over them, which means to say everything that they do is run by the yetze tov. Shene'emar, because it says v'libi halal b'kibi. David HaMelech in the book of Psalms says that I have slain my heart within me. My heart is slain within me, which means to say that David HaMelech had so completely removed the evil within him that it was like he killed it in his heart, that all that was left was good. She'ein lo yetzer hara ki harago b'ta'anit, because David HaMelech no longer had a yetzer hara. He had killed it through fasting. David extirpated his evil nature through fasting. Other ways too are possible. We thus see from the Gemara that the definition of tzaddik in its true sense applies to the person who has rid himself of his evil nature. So we're going to stop here in the Tanya. We're going to go to the Ramchal. We're going to look at something else in the nature of the soul. But just to summarize at this point where we're at, the point being as follows. Whenever we speak of what's called tzaddik, and whenever we speak of what's called rasha, in the colloquial sense, a tzaddik is somebody whose good deeds outweigh his bad. And the rasha, in the colloquial sense, is somebody whose bad deeds outweigh his good. The Beinoni, the middleman, is somebody whose good deeds and bad deeds are on the same level. When a person leaves this world, or when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and a person is judged, or even every single day when a person is judged by God, God is looking to see whether the good is outweighing the bad. Because for the majority of people in the world, for the majority of souls, because we have these natures that draw us to good and to bad, it is difficult for us to keep onto the level of good all the time. And therefore, if we can hold ourselves on the level of good the majority of time, then God says this person is a tzaddik. And if on the majority of time we fall, then we're called rasha. However, this is not really what a soul that's called a tzaddik is. A tzaddik's soul is different. A rasha soul is different. And a Beinoni soul is also different. The book of Tanya is also called the Sefer Beinonim. It's the book of the middleman. And the reason why it is called the book of the middleman is because the Alter Rebbe is saying that every single person in the world has the ability to reach the level of Beinoni. Perhaps we might not reach the level of Tzaddik, But everybody has the ability to reach the level of Beinoni, to be that person that could devote his entire life to Torah, to mitzvot, and not 1 minute of the day would go by to anything less than Torah and mitzvot. And he wants to tell us how we will get to that stage of being Beinoni. In fact, who he's talking to is the Rasha. He's talking to a person at this point in time who is actually considered to be a Rasha, an evil person. And that's not negative, but rather it relates to the level of the soul as it manifests itself in the body, and why so that it has to correct itself in order to reach these higher levels. Now,
so even the Rasha, hi Deb. So even the Rasha, the evil person, has hope.
Yes, everybody has hope, of course, and the idea is that we should not remain stagnant. We have to uplift ourselves constantly to improve to such a degree that we could become Beinonim. But the catch is, to become a Tzaddik is a whole different level. Now, everybody who's learning books like Shar HaGilgulim, The Gate of Inclinations by the Ari, and for example, even what we're going to look at now of the Derech Hashem, will start to see and understand that there are different levels of the soul. And it is not a negative thing to speak about to say that a person is a Rasha. What is negative to speak about is when we say a person is a Rasha who has decided to accept his role as being a Rasha. Once a person accepts his role, he says, I'm qualified as the soul that could never be a Tzaddik, and therefore I will not work on myself. That person is really a Rasha. But if he wants to, he can bring himself to the level of Beinoni, which is an especially high level. It is a level whereby a person does not sin. He doesn't sin in thought. He doesn't sin in action. He doesn't sin in speech. What really happens to the Beinoni is that he doesn't get rid of his evil inclination, which means the evil inclination will express itself in a certain way, but the Beinoni will not allow the evil inclination to manifest itself. The Rasha allows his evil inclination to manifest itself, and with the Tzaddik, the evil inclination does not exist, which means to say he is never perturbed, he is never worried, he is never distracted by an evil thought. When we look at the world in general, we will see that there are certain great individuals, and I'm talking about certain great Rabbis, etc., who we notice spend their entire lives devoted to Hashem. They don't lead the type of lives that we lead. Instead, their lives are involved in Torah study, in mitzvot observance, and they go from strength to strength. They never collapse. They never involve themselves in activities that bring them down. They are always moving ahead, moving ahead. You will never find them speaking Lashon Hara. You will never find them breaking Shabbos. You will never find them not eating kosher. You will never find them not putting tefillin on. You will never find them not fulfilling the mitzvot of charity. Whatever mitzvah we're talking about, Pesach, Matzah, every mitzvah that they perform is on the highest level. They can't do anything else but to observe the mitzvot on the highest level possible. Now, in the Zohar itself, on page 4a, anybody wants to can go and check it out, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai makes a very beautiful statement, and he says, who of you is converting darkness into light? And this is a very interesting statement that he makes, because what does he really mean by that? Who of you is converting darkness into light? It seems to be that he's talking about a concept of where there is something that's not so great, you turn it into something good. And he says there that there are very few people that are involved in this project of converting darkness into light. That's why he asks the question, says the Zohar. What does it mean to convert darkness into light? It means it is the job of the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik is involved in the process where he literally takes the dark and he converts it into light. How is he able to achieve that? Because he is not brought down by the darkness, and therefore he's able to uplift it into a state of light. Whereas the Rasha, when he gets involved in the darkness brings him down. And he has to work hard on it, and he tries to overcome it, and he tries to make sure it doesn't manifest itself. But he's so busy trying to deal with this darkness in front of him that he can never turn it into light. The Tzaddik, on the other hand, takes the darkness and he turns it into light. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai begins the Zohar, page 4a, right at the beginning, and he says, who of you, he's talking to the world, he says, are you that great person? Are you that Tzaddik? Meaning, is it your nature that all that you have inside of yourself is that when you see the darkness, you turn it into light, or are you completely overwhelmed by the darkness that the darkness brings you down? Any time that the darkness brings you down, you know you've had it. You're not on the level of Tzaddik, because the Tzaddik is involved in a process of going from level to level to level, constantly taking the darkness and bringing it to a level of light. He is never affected by the darkness. He holds on to it and he brings it up higher. Nothing affects him. It's kind of like if you would imagine a very strong person, and there's the person who fell into a pit, and there's a very strong person, and he's on the top of the pit, and he puts his hand down with some rope or whatever, and he tells the fellow at the bottom, he says, grab hold of the rope and I'll pull you up. And he's a very strong person. And as he begins to pull this man up, even with one hand, he pulls the man right out of the pit and he saves his life. How was he able to do it? Because he was exceptionally strong. But if he was a weak man, then when the man was in the pit and he came to save his life, you know what would happen to him? He'd fall into the pit himself. And that's a tough test to deal with. Once he's in the pit, he has to get himself out and the man. Now he has to call for somebody else. Please pull us both out of the pit. So the Rasha is dealing with a situation of darkness which can bring him down. And he's got to somehow overcome it. He's got to just make sure it doesn't manifest itself. And the righteous person is somebody who takes the darkness and he pulls it out completely and he transforms it into light. He takes a dark room, he switches a switch and the light turns on and there is no longer darkness. The Beinonim, on the other hand, is a person who is stuck right in the middle. He's a person who is not pulled down by evil. On the other hand, he has not yet learned how to turn the darkness into light. And therefore, he finds himself at a level whereby there is a concept of darkness existing, but he is in such a state that he never allows the darkness to manifest itself. Rabbah thought of himself mistakenly that he was the Beinonim, because he was a bit too modest, let's say, and he didn't want to say to himself, oh, maybe I'm a Tzaddik. Why? Because he was so involved in Torah study that he never had the time to even think of the possibility, maybe I'm a Tzaddik. But I do know for sure that I'm Beinonim, because my whole life is spent involved in Torah. But I'm so busy studying Torah, I'm so busily involved in what it means to be involved in a Torah lifestyle that I can't imagine, am I a Tzaddik or not? So when his pupil comes to him, when Rabbah comes to him, and he says, and Abaya comes to him, Abaya, his pupil, comes to him, and he says to him, you don't let us live. What he's effectively saying is that if you're a Beinonim, then we've had it. But the truth of the matter is we know better. You're the Tzaddik. If you are the Tzaddik, most of us can't achieve the level that you're on, which does mean that we have the opportunity to grow and that we have the opportunity to reach the level of the Beinonim. And the whole book of the Tanya is to get us to a level to understand the natures of the two souls. As we're going to see later on, it is a fight of the body. The body is considered to be a city. And on the city, there are two kings. There is a good king and there is an evil king. And both of the kings are fighting for the dominion of the city. So the good king says, I want to rule over the city. And the bad king, as is brought down in Kohelet, Bashom HaMelech, the bad king says, I want to rule over the city. And so there's this constant fight that goes on. This is the life of the Beinonim. He will experience the fight, but he has to be a person who becomes so strong that he never allows the darkness to manifest itself. If he can get to that level, then he can think about the level of Tzaddik. But the Tzaddik, there's no concept of darkness bringing him down at all. He exists on a plane whereby everything is light, which means that when he sees darkness, he turns it into the light. He cannot imagine what the darkness is and why it should even be there. He immediately turns it over into the world of light. This was the story I forgot to mention last week, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, why did I forget it? But the story goes like this. We know that there was a great Hasidic leader by the name of Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev. And Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev was known as the Ohev Yisrael. He loved his fellow Jew tremendously. To such a degree, he loved his fellow Jew that he saw no bad in him. No matter what he was doing, Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev could not find anything bad in a fellow Jew. Now, the thing is like this. Once it happened that somebody came to him and he said that he saw he saw a wagon driver. He was most upset because the wagon driver had to change one of the wheels of the wagon that had broken off. And while he put on his tefillin and he davened the whole of Shakris while he was busy changing the wheel. So the man came to Rabbi Yitzchak of Berichev and he told him it's a terrible thing. I mean, there's davening and there's a time for fixing wagons. How dare he think that he can daven Shakris meanwhile while he's fixing the wagon? So Rabbi Yitzchak of Berichev said, "Oh, Hashem, how great are your Jewish people, that even when they're involved in such a minor, in such a material thing, like they're fixing a wagon, even then they put tefillin on and they pray to you." Rabbi Yitzchak of Berichev could see no darkness. He took the darkness and he turned it into light. How was he able to do that? Because we have a principle that when we find a fault in our fellow man, it is because we ourselves have the fault within ourselves. But when we don't notice the fault in our fellow man, even if we see he did something wrong, but we don't see it as a fault, rather we just see it as something that could be improved upon, or we want to mention to the fellow, hey, you should do things in a different way. Maybe stealing isn't so great. But if we see it in a negative way, hey, you stole from him. What an evil person you are. And you go tell your friends, what an evil person he is. He stole, he did this, he did this. Probably it could be that within the person himself, he has the trait of theft, as something dangerous within himself, and so he sees it in his fellow, and it bothers him. But when he sees it in his fellow, and he's able to convert it to good, he goes up to his fellow and he says, stealing from other people is not such a great idea. Let me give you some ideas of how we can overcome it. Or perhaps, are you lacking wealth? Is that your problem? Then let us try and find a charity fund that can help you. I don't know what. But the point is, when we see the bad in somebody, it's because we have the bad ourselves within ourselves. So how is it that Rabbi Yitzchak of Berichev could see the person changing the wheel of the wagon, and he's got his tefillin on, and he can't see the negative? What's the answer? Because the negative is not within himself. So all he sees is the positive of what this Jew is doing. And that is exactly the concept of turning the darkness into light. That wherever we go, whatever we're looking at with our eyes, we're able to perceive that actually what's there is good, not bad. And if we do see the bad, if we seem to see that there's darkness, we have to be on this super duper level whereby we can overcome that darkness in a way whereby we transform it into light. If we get sucked in to the darkness and we imagine that we're stuck over there and it's pulling us down and we can't seem to get out and we're irritated by it and we're irritated when we see it in other people, that is a sign that we're below the Beinonim. We're not even yet at the Beinonim level. The Beinonim is on this parva level whereby he doesn't commit any sins, but he's working hard. He still can't get to the level of transforming the darkness into light. On the other hand, the Tzaddik is a person who's completely removed evil from within him. And when he looks around in the world, of course he sees bad. There is bad. He sees murder happening. He sees the theft happening. But when he sees it, his eyes look upon it in a way of repair to heal it, not in a way of negativity in order to insult it. And that is the key that we need to do. That is what we have to work on. And so the Tanya is telling us, as an average person, or as the evil person, even worse really, we're evil people, so to speak, we're the Rasha in inverted commas, and we're working on ourselves in this way, whereby we have these two kings that are involved in this fight for rulership over the body. And the one king of the city, and the one king says, I want to rule the city. The good king says, I'm going to rule the body and I'm in charge of it. And the bad king says, no, I am in charge of it. And so a person goes off and he commits an aveira, God forbid. Or a person goes off and commits and he does a mitzvah. Why? Because at that point in time, the good king ruled or the bad king ruled. The idea is to get ourselves to a level whereby we have this relationship whereby even if there is a bad king who wants rulership of the body, we do not allow the bad king to have any rulership at all. Instead, the good king says everything, the good king thinks everything, the good king does everything that should be good. In this way, we have the opportunity to elevate ourselves to be Beinonim, and thereafter we can be Tzaddikim. Now, just very briefly, as we said before, that there are different levels of souls, and anybody who's learning the Shara Gilgulim, for example, of the Ari, of Reshaim Vital, will clearly see that there are different parts of the soul. And each of us has a soul which comes from a certain level in Shamayim and needs to be repaired according to the level that it's at in this world. It is not a negative thing to be considered on this level of Rasha. What it is that we need to acknowledge it and to know where we are at so that we can know how to improve ourselves to reach the level that we're supposed to be going towards.